Said he's having no trouble. It's simple.
Hello there. It's showtime.
What is this, trick or treat?
Did I do that?
Good morning, Charlie.
Sailor Moon, the champion of justice.
Deal with it. Daddy would have gotten us Uzis.
The power is yours.
Get down, honey, get down.
And look, I won't go far, okay? If the apocalypse comes,
Hold your fire. I'm a human.
Grace Jones.
Thundercats.
Power of 3 will set us free. Power of 3 will set us free. Power of 3 will set us free.
But I ain't one to gossip, so if anyone asks you, you ain't heard it from me. No, you have.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We do.
Welcome back, Radical Ones, to another episode of the Radical Retro Rewind podcast. As always, I am your host, Radical Ryan Hunter, and today we have an amazing special guest. He is a talented writer, producer, and showrunner. His work includes 911 Lone Star, CSI New York, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, Station 19, Supernatural, Witch, and Beyond. He's also the co-creator and co-host of the Be Good Humans podcast, which I have been listening to lately and I absolutely love. Please welcome Trey Callaway to the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I've been trying to see how fast I can say Radical Retro Rewind podcast with Ryan Hunter. That's not easy. You've given yourself a mouthful there, my friend.
I don't know why I did that to myself, but yeah, even 5 years later doing this, it still makes me have a little pause when I do it.
Well done.
Trey, by the way, you have an amazing voice. I have to tell you, listening to the podcast, and I am such a podcast person, like, you know, hearing voices like that, you have the best voice for this.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Yeah, look, I grew up in a family of advertising creatives and writers and musicians, but I also grew up with a deep, passionate love for radio, and was, for a brief period of time, was an on-air personality at a radio station in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I grew up. And so that's sort of where I learned some chops. And then I produced radio commercials in Los Angeles as a creative director for an ad agency for a number of years before I started writing full time. So I've never lost my love for radio, up to and including the fact that I'm in Greece right now and working on a top secret TV project. But I make it a habit. As soon as I got here, I made it a habit of like turning on the local radio, just because I love to get to know a place through the radio, even if I don't understand the language. So big fan of radio, but thank you for acknowledging that.
Oh, most definitely. It's like one of the first thing you notice listening to that podcast, and you do this with your good friend.
Brian Phelps is
Brian Phelps. Thank you so much.
No, speaking of radio, he is a bona fide radio legend, not just in Southern California, where for 25 years he was half of a legendary morning radio team called Mark and Brian on KLOS, and then syndicated across the country and around the world with, they had their own NBC series. They got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He is now inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. So for me, again, to go back to that notion of listening to the radio, because I grew up with it. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I didn't know a soul. And one of the first things I did was turn on the local radio stations to try and get to know the city. And that my arrival coincided with the arrival of Brian Phelps and his then partner, Mark Thompson. And so Mark and Brian debuted on the air at the same time I arrived in Los Angeles. And I like to irritate Brian. Yeah, I like to irritate Brian by telling him that he was kind of my first friend in Los Angeles. He just didn't know me yet. And so it's been a real full circle, wonderful experience to hear my voice next to his, to be in that studio and on that podcast with him has been just an absolute joy. He is not only a legend, but he is truly one of my dearest friends and the epitome of what it means to be a good human.
That is beautiful. So can you just tell the listeners what you would say being a good human is, and why was that the title of your podcast? Because on our show, we are always about keeping it light, making people
Yeah.
happy, laughing, like celebrating life. So
Yes.
when you have something like Be Good Humans is just a fantastic title. I love this.
Well, it comes directly from Brian, because for all of those 25 years on the air, when he was hosting that morning program, he would sign off every episode of Mark and Brian the same way, by encouraging his listeners to be good humans. And so when he and I first started kicking things around, and he's a brilliant improvisational comedian, and we were talking about all different kinds of concepts, but I kept coming back to, hey man, you set the template for us 11 years ago when you went off the air, but for 25 years before that, like, you set this template by encouraging people to be good humans. And why don't we just do that? Especially in a time when the world feels a little chaotic and dark in a whole variety of ways around us. Without being treacly, without being saccharine, without being overly earnest, let's try to find ways to lift people up a little bit by shining a light on people from all over the world, all walks of life, different ages, different genders, different life stories, just people who have one thing in common, which is that in some small, fun, quirky, heartfelt, often funny way, they're just trying to make the world a better place. And so that for me, it was beyond the full circle, heartwarming experience of getting to co-host a show with one of my radio heroes. Just being able to meet these people from all over the place and hear their stories and talk to them in and around some comedy and some conversation. It was an absolute gift. So yeah, that's where it all came from. It was inspired by something he said for many years, and then we just decided to pick up the torch and run with it.
I love this, like you're saying, all over the world, and that's something like a podcast can reach. You'll never realize how many people all of a sudden you start looking like. Speaking of Greece, there's listeners from Greece.
Yeah,
it's just amazing, and it goes back to that radio thing when you listen to people and hear their stories. I just love the medium.
My youngest son Cosmo, who is a junior at Tufts University and studying international relations, actually studying abroad here in Europe right now. He hosts a radio show. He hosts a radio show on WMFO in Medford, Massachusetts. And last summer, he was one of the interns at KCRW in Los Angeles, which is a flagship NPR station. I only bring this up because he put it best when he came home from work at KCRW one day, and he had kind of an epiphany. And he was like, "Dad, I figured out the power of radio." And I was like, "What is that?" And he said, "It builds community on a local level." And he couldn't be more right about that. But it also, thanks to the podcasting medium, it also builds it on a global level, but it brings people together for whatever reason, whether it's you're just trying to be a good human or you're trying to enjoy, looking back on radical retro rewind aspects of pop culture, whatever it is, we all want to belong to a tribe in one shape or form. Right. And so it's great to sort of pull people together. Anyway, that's enough. I'll stop sermonizing. Take your show and run with it.
No, please. I mean, anyone who listens to this show knows we go on tangents all the time. Mm-hmm. That is just so up our alley because, again, we always want to celebrate life and just enjoying things. So how has Greece been treating you, by the way, on your secret project?
Extremely well, especially today. Finally, the sun is out. I will say I've been here for a little over a month now, and when I first arrived, as wonderful as the people are and as exciting as the project is, it is not exactly the Greece that has been advertised to me all my life, which is, generally speaking, those images of Santorini and the white plastered, blue roofed, views
blue and
of the
white
seaside
everywhere.
When I got here, literally at 11 o'clock on my first night here, it was pouring rain and it was freezing cold. And it's been that way for the majority of the time I've been here which is their winter, until just this past week. And suddenly things are clearing up and it's looking sunny and I can run outside in a t-shirt, don't have to get, multiple jackets on. And so I'm actually really enjoying it now, but I'm especially enjoying it because of the project that I'm working on, which I look forward to telling you more about when I'm able to speak about it freely.
How exciting. I love this. And of course, being on location must just be beautiful when it's treating you nice, the weather.
Yeah, absolutely, and also the people, just extremely warm and welcoming, and very talented and skilled and passionate crew and cast, and so yeah, I don't like to be a tease. I have to remain a tease for now, but I can just tell you that I'm having a great time. I'm having a great time in Greece.
You know what? It's the anticipation out for everybody. What's he working on? What's coming out? I love that. So, talking about past projects, and of
Yeah,
course, we're going all the way back now. One
okay.
of our listener favorites is I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
Make sure he's really dead.
There is currently a legacy sequel in the works now, but
yeah.
for so many years, we only had these two films. Some people don't want to mention the other ones, but the main two with Julie James. I am just shocked, though, Trey, that this was written and done within a year of the last movie.
Yeah.
Like, how is even beginning that project like that?
It was a whole
You have a
series.
year till.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, I had two things going at once. It was quite a whirlwind of a year for me. Actually, I should say I had three things going on at once, because in 1997, not only had I sold an original movie that was then adapted into my first television series that then got picked up and greenlit into production. I also had my first movie produced, which was I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which was sold on a pitch that they asked me to come in with. And then at the same time, my first child was being born. So there was an enormous amount going on in my life. But on the I Still Know of it all, the two projects, that TV series and I Still Know, were actually directly related with each other, because I had sold in early 1997, I sold an original science fiction movie pitch to Columbia Pictures and Mandalay Pictures, Peter Guber's company. And
Yes.
At the time, it was called Nightingale One. It was about a space station hospital of sorts. And after developing that project with them, which was a really positive process and a lot of fun, I think it was Starship Troopers that maybe opened and did not do well or underperformed at the box office. And so the studio sort of lost its taste for big budget sci-fi. And so that spelled the end of my movie development. But when I first had pitched that movie, I made a joke in my original pitch to Peter Guber and a whole bunch of other people at his conference table. I made a joke that, oh, by the way, this would also make a killer TV series. And then one of those executives who'd been in that original pitch called me up after the feature, officially died, and said, "Hey, you made a joke about this making a great source for a TV series, but I didn't think it was funny, which is why I sent the last draft of your feature to the president of UPN, which was then a network that is no longer, and
yes,
rest in peace, became the
UPN.
CW. Yeah, became the CW. It became the WB and then the CW. But anyway, the president of UPN then hired me to write that feature or adapt that feature into a TV series, which became Mercy Point. And Mercy Point was a space station medical drama set in the 23rd century. It starred Joe Morton and Joe Spano and a big cast. We shot in Vancouver. I inherited the crew from the X-Files, and it was my first foray into television in a big way. I was running my first series. It was the first pilot I ever wrote. And then suddenly it was picked up. And then I was the quote unquote showrunner, even though I didn't even know what that was yet. I had not learned anything about the business. But because of all of that, Columbia and Mandalay called me in again to say, "Hey, we know you're busy right now, but we're going to make a sequel to I Know What You Did Last Summer. If you have an idea for a sequel, we would love to hear your pitch." And so I went away for a weekend, probably longer than that, but I had an idea that I then built into a pitch. And then I went back into what was a warm and friendly room because I had just finished writing a feature for them. And now they were attached as my producing partners on a TV series as well. So I went in and gave them my pitch on I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and they bought my pitch. and then lit a fire under me, basically making it clear that, like you've already pointed out, they had a very ambitious production schedule. They wanted my script as soon as possible. They wanted me around for as many production drafts as possible before it went into production. And so I had these two giant jobs going at the same time. And it was quite
fatherhood, my God.
And fatherhood, yeah. So it was a lot. It was a lot coming at me at the same time. And what I also didn't know, here's a little trivia for you, although you and your listeners may know this already, but a lot of people don't. What I didn't know, and this is fairly, or it can be fairly customary procedure in Hollywood. What I didn't know is that at the same time they bought my pitch for I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, they bought another pitch from another writer for I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. And he wrote an entirely different draft with an entirely different concept. And neither of us knew that we were basically in a horse race with each other. And the idea was they were going to take both of those drafts and then they were going to decide which, if either of them worked, and that they could greenlight immediately into production. So thankfully I won that battle. Wow. And they chose my draft, but it worked out well for him because the writer of the other draft, which was set in New Orleans, it was a completely different story. The writer of that film was a very talented writer and director named Stephen Gaghan, who later won the Oscar for writing the movie Traffic. So, so
wow,
we were in a horse race with each other and didn't even know it. I didn't even know any of that until after my film had already been greenlit into production, and I was in production drafts. But yeah,
would that have changed anything? Knowing at the time while you were writing it, would that have given you maybe anxiety or of some kind, or is?
Well, look, it's a very competitive business. You learn that pretty early on, and if you can't handle that kind of heat, then you might have chosen the wrong professional path for yourself. I didn't know the specifics of it, but you are always looking over your shoulder a little bit in this business, wondering, what other kind of game is at play. And so, I guess I should say it didn't surprise me when I found that out in the end. I was just happy that in the end they chose my story.
So you had that pitch. Was that something that you had just come up with? Or, I mean, upon seeing the first one, did you think, if they ever wanted to continue this,
so here's how I got
way
there.
In here or here?
Let me tell you how I got there. When I was in high school, I worked at a grocery store. I was a bag boy, and then I worked in the grocery department, and I also used my voice to do in-store announcements for the grocery store, and then ultimately
I could see that.
ultimately the grocery chain and all that stuff. So I was working at this grocery store, and one of the managers in this grocery store had a little side hustle, and he and his wife opened a tan salon that was just a few doors down from the grocery store. And this was when those tanning beds first arrived in the United States, and tan salons were starting to pop up everywhere. The old models with the light tubes in them and all that stuff. And he knew that I was an artist as well, that I liked to do a lot of graphic design. And so he asked me if I would make a logo for his tan salon. First, if I would come up with a name for it, help him come up with a name for it, which I did. And then if I would make a logo, which I did. And his tan salon was called At the Beach. So that you could say to your friends, if they said, "Hey, where'd you get your tan?" "Oh, I got it at the beach," right? Okay, so
at the beach.
At the beach tan salon. So he asked me if I would paint. He asked me if I would paint the logo on the back wall of his store, of the tan salon, which I did on a weekend, and just as a high schooler, you'll do anything for a couple of bucks. But he not only gave me a couple of bucks, but he also gave me, I don't know, a few dozen free tan sessions. And I had you can see on camera, I'm as white as they come. Like Scottish Irish heritage. I know this. All I get is a sunburn when I step outside. So I really had no business doing this. But again, I was in high school and I wanted to look cool and see if I could get a tan. So I went for the first time to At the Beach Tan Salon. And the first time I got in one of those beds and I closed the lid over myself, I immediately started to feel a little claustrophobic. And because I'm a dramatist and
Yes.
a storyteller, all I could think about the whole time I was in there is, what if somebody chained this thing shut and just cooked me alive? That would be horrible. So when they asked me at Mandalay, if you'd like to come in with a pitch for a sequel, we would love to hear your thoughts. I'm not kidding you. The first my go-to scary thought was,
Yes.
what if I got sealed in a thing? And then that made me think about At the Beach, the tan salon. And then that made me think about, well, what if they go on some kind of tropical vacation? And then I built the story from there, and that's how it got started.
And that tanning bed scene, honestly, is one of those ones that I will remember always from that movie. So
yeah, most people do.
This is amazing, just hearing where it started from. My goodness. And okay, so that's how you set up the island setting as well, because that was going to be my next question.
That's how I set up the island setting, but also to circle back, because of my love for radio, I was like, well, how could they get forced onto a tropical island in a way that they don't realize is a setup, right? And so I used the old radio DJ thing where you're listening to the radio and there's a giveaway, and what's funny about that is it's that movie remains to this day a basic entry level geography quiz, and if you know your geography, then the minute they win that trip, you're like, that's not right. That doesn't make sense, right? And so I'll tell you another funny little story. My mom, God rest her soul. My mother, God rest her soul, I brought my parents to the premiere of I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and they were sitting there next to me in the theater with the whole cast and crew and everybody there, and all the red carpet action of it all. And there we sit in a darkened theater. And my mom, who could never contain herself in a theater, she would always talk to the screen, and she would always be too loud in her reactions or whatever. The minute those girls win that radio contest, my mom said out loud, "Rio's not the capital of Brazil."
At the premiere, Mike.
Yeah, and I was like, shh, be quiet, Mom. I know.
Rio.
Okay, Rio de Janeiro.
Oh no. Did you say Rio?
No. Yes? Yes.
You just won Magic 96.7.
That's so. Again, there's a little radio influence that came into play, and then also the At the Beach tanning salon is really where the whole thing started.
It actually reminds me. One of my closest friends, he's from Brazil, and he absolutely. I know, and I still know, are two of his favorite movies.
Well, those movies did very well there.
The I was going to say that they did did very well there, and he remembers still being in the theater and hearing that, and he said he remembers everyone in Brazil just cheering, hearing Brazil at first, and then it was quietness after that. But of course, it comes back. It comes back at the end.
Yes, correct.
And there's so many little things like that in this movie. I love a play on words. I love Ben's son. Things like that just make me so giddy. So I enjoy things like that.
What's your favorite radio station, Julie?
Well, good. You're not alone. I was giddy at the time.
When I was younger, watching this back in the day, I fell for all of it. I did, I went for it, and I was like, oh, Ben's son. So, you got me. You got me. One thing about this movie that really fans love is how you gave Julie James really more of a personality. Because, in the first one, she's stuck in that we killed somebody, which, I don't blame her. Right. But she really got to have a little fun in this movie. So I feel like fans they saw this side of her, and they appreciate seeing this in the sequel. So was that something consciously that you did?
Yeah, definitely. Because listen, when you've experienced trauma, even if you are an active participant in causing that trauma and all of the resulting guilt that comes along with it, you're a human being who still needs to breathe every once in a while and needs to try and escape that.
Yes.
Your instinct is to try and get away from that darkness, right? So it was, and listen, Love did a great job with this in the same way she does with all of her performances. They're always nuanced. There's always an
Yeah.
undercurrent of emotion, right? And so it was interesting, first of all, to be able to give her a best friend in Brandy who was just excited and wanted her to lighten up and
Love.
do all the things that a best friend would want you to do and would function as to try and get you out of your doldrums.
Yes.
But the moral of the story there is, wherever you go, this is a true fact about any vacation experience. Wherever
Yeah.
you go, no matter how beautiful or lush or how close it may be to paradise, you bring all your problems with you, right?
So true. So
Love,
true.
right. So Love was the perfect person to carry that weight, in that, like, she was upset. She was experiencing relationship issues, not sure if she could fully leave the past behind in college and just have a good
Yes.
time. And then as soon as she opens the door to that possibility and lets herself try and let go of that past, it comes creeping back on her, right? And so that was definitely
Yes.
an intentional effort on my part, because I knew that character. I understood that those were sort of the parameters that were baked into the character that would be fun to play with in a tropical resort.
And you mentioned the best friend character. Another thing, Carla, Brandy.
Yeah.
Another things that fans are so thankful for, that you gave her a friend like that actually would be a friend that you would want, and like encouraging and go for this guy, do that. Fantastic. And the fact that she survived, which again, now, was that a conscious effort on your part? Because usually the best friends
usually
don't survive these things.
Usually they're the first to go. I did lobby hard for, look, we knew that Julie James was going to survive, but I did lobby hard for Carla to stay alive. I figured that Mackay would probably meet an ugly end in some way, shape, or form. And, everybody else, it's a body count. And, what's funny, too, is that a number of those characters are named after people in my life, and so they weren't.
You're kidding.
They weren't particularly thrilled to see themselves killed. But to me, it's a badge of honor. But like
I would say,
there's going to be a body count in that kind of a film. But I was definitely of the mind that Carla should survive in the end.
Carla, God, I thought I would never see you again. Oh, girl, you don't have to worry about me. I made a still.
And it'll be funny, I don't know. I know very little about the new. I think it drops in July of this year, or at least it's supposed to.
Yes.
The new sequel, but it seems to me like, or my guess anyway, is that they're probably about to pull off what I had long wanted to do, which is, let's check back in. I say this as the father of three. Like, whenever my mind would go back to the characters of I Still Know, I would think, well, where are they now? What, and do they have kids of their own? And does that trauma continue to not only haunt them, but could it then impact their families in some way? And so I hope that that's the direction they're going in. It sounds like, from what little bits and pieces I've heard through the grapevine, that that's at least in the zip code of it all. And so it'll be really nice to sort of catch up with Julie James now and see where she's at and what's become of her.
So there you go. I mean, you set up one of my questions then too. So when you're writing in general, I mean, any character, we'll say Julie because that makes sense with what we're talking about. But do you go back to them like this? Like, do you say like, wow, I wonder how Carla's doing it, like anything from any series? I mean, of course, you're always on to the next project, and these are years and years in between. But
yeah, but you're speaking to one of the core joys of being a writer, of being a storyteller, is the ability to, even if it's a temporary period of time, to inhabit the life of someone else. Actors have this experience all the time, but to inhabit the life of someone else, to see things from their perspective, to to go through an emotional experience by proxy. Those are things that I never get tired of. But you're
Yes.
absolutely right that once you inhabit that space, it's hard not to. Yeah, I've told hundreds of stories since then, but it's hard not to reflect back on those characters that you spent some time with, and then wonder where they are, wonder what they're up to,
Yeah.
and even in some cases, want to try and figure out how to reconnect with them. So that's very real, and that's why I'll probably be one of the first people to buy a ticket to the new one, just to sort of see where they've taken them.
I might be a little biased because I've seen this movie so many times, but man, do I wish you had a little hand in creating that sandbox again, and continuing the characters, just as a personal,
Yeah, but it's
But,
funny. I've gotten to a couple of times. I've spent a little bit of time with Kevin Williamson over the years, and most recently
wow.
during the strikes, he and I were marching together at a showrunners
Oh,
march,
yes.
and our mutual friends, were getting a kick out of putting "I Know What You Did Last Summer" side by side with "I Still Know What You Did Last Summer" while we were marching. But he was very gracious. He was very gracious about passing that torch to someone else, and then I carried the torch for a while, and it's been passed a few times since. And it's okay. It's a creative community. It's a collaborative medium. It's nice to see where somebody else takes things.
I do want to touch on another classic that our listeners, our radical ones, might have remembered, especially if you grew up in the 90s.
Okay.
This is Witch. This is now. I feel like
Witch.
this has such a niche, loyal fan base. Trey. This is,
Yes.
of course, it started as an Italian comic book,
Yeah.
but there was an animated series. Who was working on a project like bringing a comic like that to life, especially. This is the time of Sailor Moon. This is very like the girls transforming and girl power. And man, do we love like a female team that can kick evil's butt.
Who wouldn't? Yeah. So look, I've always been a fan of the animation medium. I grew up adoring Saturday morning cartoons, and then when I've been teaching at USC Film School for 20 years now, but I originally started there as an undergrad myself. And while I was there, I had an internship working at Disney as an intern on The Rescuers Down Under. So I got to do a little bit of work in animation.
I love
there.
The Rescuers.
And then,
wow.
And then through some of those experiences and connections I made, I wound up writing some Lion King cartoons, some Timon and Pumbaa, some
Timon and Pumbaa, yes,
Laughing Hyena cartoons and stuff. And so I was kind of in the Disney space. And then my wife and I, Nancy Neufeld, is a comedy writer. We were approached by an executive at Disney, who was then an executive at Disney, the amazing Jillian Reinseth Burns. And I'd never heard of Witch. And we were given a box full of Italian comic books, none of which we could read because neither of us speak Italian.
I was going to ask. Okay.
But we were told about the basics of the series, and we were asked if we would be interested in developing it. And so we did. And I even took things a step further. Because I'm also a musician, I wrote a theme song for which I then recorded and produced with my friend Christopher Ting, who is a brilliant composer who's most well known for, he was the composer for Futurama, for Suits, for Suits LA. He's a brilliant composer, but he and I recorded a theme song for which that I wrote, which ultimately did not get chosen by the network. They made a mistake there because it was super cool. We wrote a couple of episodes, but then we were also brought in to produce the voice tracks for, I want to say the first couple of seasons. Maybe it was just one season, but those seasons are really long. There's tons of episodes. So I just remember doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
But what was so great about that, to come back to radio, when I was working as a creative director for a Los Angeles-based broadcast promotion firm before I started writing full-time, I got to work with a who's who of LA's legendary voice talent, like literally everybody. It was Don LaFontaine, the In a World, like all of those.
Yes.
I worked with Ernie Anderson. I worked with June Foray. I worked with Thurl Ravenscroft, who was Tony the Tiger. They're great, and
Wow.
he also sang "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." Like, I got to work with all these incredible people. And I loved that experience so much that the opportunity to not just write on Witch, but then produce the voice tracks and the voice sessions was fantastic because, I worked with, Candy Milo has been a friend of mine for many years. She's still a friend of mine, but she played Irma on Witch. She also played Irma's mom. She played Principal Knickerbocker. She's like one of those utility players that plays multiple voices in the show. But also
Amazing.
Kelly Stables was Will, and Liza Del Mundo was Halen, which was a character near and dear to my heart because our first child, our daughter Clementine, her middle name is Halen. So she was all excited when she got old enough to watch Witch. Crystal Khalil, who played Cornelia, Kitty Kaboom, who was Tirani. So they were great. But then there was also this bench of incredible voice actors. D. Bradley Baker, who is well known and loved in the animation world.
Yes.
Frost the Hunter, but he also played like every grunt and groan, and he can make animal monster noises and like the things that he does with his throat and his vocal cords. Yeah, it's amazing. But also, like, that show had Ed Asner on it in a voice role. Dan Gilbazan, CCH Pounder was on that show. Jim Cummings, who plays most famously Winnie the Pooh for Disney. Then the late, great Billy Hayes was in the voice cast of that show. And Billy Hayes, this is probably too old a reference for you, my friend, but Billy Hayes, when I was a kid watching those Saturday morning cartoons, played not Witch, but Witchy Pooh in H.R. Puffin stuff. So she was in the cast of Witch.
Stuff.
Yeah, she was in the cast of Witch. So there were all kinds of amazing voice talents, and I remember just sort of pinching myself in those sessions with Ginny McSwain, who is still a legendary voice director. And so we would produce the sessions with Ginny and work with all those actors. And it was just really a lot of fun. We had a really, really good time working on that. And, and then I remember it was originally intended to be a part of a short-lived Disney Channel, or at least programming block, that was called Jetix. And it was designed for it was designed for boys, kind of. It was supposed to be sort of like
this block,
boyish action fare. But the truth is, like, it was a great female empowerment story, and so it was really designed for kids of all ages and all genders. But then Jetix, so it was designed to be a showpiece, show for Jetix, but then Jetix kind of folded really quickly, and so. Which I know it was around for a couple, 2-3 more seasons after we did our work, but I moved on to other things, and then we never saw or heard from it again until just recently, by the way. And this is a little bit of scoop, but I have to leave names out of it. A dear writer friend of mine, who shall go unnamed at this point because I don't want to betray any confidences, I know has been a part of a series of meetings happening at Disney right now about a live action reboot of that series. So, stay tuned for more information there.
Man, you're always setting me up to my next question. This is fantastic because this is a series that I do think would be fantastic to revisit. I'm surprised Disney hasn't done something sooner. So that's exciting. That is exciting.
Especially because they love shows where there's, a heavy component of world building, where people can really lose themselves in a world, and you can explore that world in a multitude of directions for story, and Witch has that just completely baked into it. So I'm surprised that they haven't done it already, but it sounds like they're making moves to do it soon.
And you know what? Good writing and great acting, it doesn't matter. Boy, girl, it will appeal to, like you said, it will appeal to all ages, genders. So great shows like that. And I hope we get more of them. So I want to ask you one more question because I don't want to hold you any longer. Just going back to, I still know I have a question that I've always had. I don't know if you want to keep it mysterious, but What is your take when Julie has that karaoke scene and she sees I Still Know? Now, most people say, oh, she saw it in her head. I feel like that was real. But I don't know. I will leave it up to you. Again, if you want to leave it to the audience, but...
Well, first of all, you should know that I am a shameless fan of disco, and so I immediately
who wouldn't be? I mean, disco's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a shameless fan of music in general of all different kinds, but I knew I wanted to write a karaoke sequence into that, and the first thing that came to my mind was the immortal Gloria Gaynor "I Will Survive" track, because I thought it played so well again to that kind of trauma that she has been experiencing. But
yes.
even when I wrote it, I will just tell you this. I wrote it, and I remember having a conversation with the director, Danny Cannon, about this after he read it. And he asked me, is this really happening, or is this happening in her head? And I said, yes. Because that is
perfect.
That was always my answer to this. I always wanted you to be able to look at it both ways and go, yes, it's happened.
I love that.
And by the way, if it only
it certainly has.
Well, and if it only happened in her mind, it didn't make it any less impactful, right? Because again, what I'm talking about is true. Paradise is a temporary state. I'm sorry, that's just how the human condition works. Even if you haven't killed somebody a few summers ago and tried to cover it up, we've all got our own forms. We've all got our own forms of trauma that we carry around, and you take it with you everywhere you go. And so, paradise is a lamentably temporary state. And so, I just wanted to sort of keep going back to that well of like, oh, you've come on a tropical vacation, but now it's raining. Oh, you're going to go to the bar and sing karaoke with your friends, but now you're seeing things or you're frightened in ways that you didn't imagine you would be. You just keep getting poked by the past that you're trying to outrun. And so, the answer to the question is yes. That's all I can tell you.
Yes. And I absolutely love that. Trey, thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, truly, your busy schedule, it means the world to me that you would come on our little humble show like this and talk to me. So thank you so much.
It is my absolute honor and privilege to appear with you here on the Radical, I'm going to get it wrong, the Radical Retro Rewind podcast with Ryan Hunter. Is that right?
Oh, beautiful. Okay, chef's kiss. That was fantastic. Radical Ones, I will leave the link to Be Good Humans podcast in our descriptions because I'm telling you, this is actually going to become, no lie, one of my go-to podcasts because just researching it really does make you feel really good. So thank you again. Much. Thank you for this. And
my absolute pleasure.
As always, Radical One, please.
No, as always, Radical One's what?
Oh, stay radical. That's what.
Stay radical.